Dread horror, uncover the darkest mysteries that remain unsolved. If you dare, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a terrifying story. In the quiet town of Ravenswood, nestled between dense forests and rolling hills, stood the venerable Blackwood Academy. Established in the late 1800s, the school was renowned for its Gothic architecture, complete with towering spires, arched hallways, and intricate stone carvings. Generations of students had walked its halls, but beneath its esteemed reputation lay whispers of unsettling occurrences. Stories passed down through the years, tales that many dismissed as mere folklore. Chapter 1: The New Arrival. Elena Thompson transferred to Blackwood Academy in her junior year. Her parents' recent divorce had uprooted her from the bustling city life she knew, placing her in this secluded town. As she approached the looming structure of the academy, a chill ran down her spine. The overcast sky and the cawing of distant crows did little to alleviate her unease. Her first day was uneventful, filled with the usual introductions and curious glances from her peers. However, it wasn't long before she noticed the peculiar behavior of the students. Conversations would hush as she approached, and she often caught them casting furtive glances toward the east wing of the school, a section that appeared older and more decrepit than the rest. Curiosity gnawed at Elena. During lunch, she overheard snippets of conversations. "Did you hear it last night? The crying from the east wing. They say she still roams the halls, searching." Determined to uncover the mystery, Elena approached her classmate, Daniel, who seemed more approachable than the rest. "What's in the east wing?" she inquired. Daniel's eyes widened. "You don't know? It's been closed off for years. They say it's haunted by the spirit of a student who vanished decades ago." Elena's interest was piqued. That evening, instead of heading to the dormitories, she found herself standing before the sealed doors of the east wing. The padlock was rusted, and with a bit of effort it gave way. The door creaked open, revealing darkness beyond. Stepping inside, Elena was enveloped by an eerie silence. Dust motes danced in the faint light filtering through cracked stained glass windows. The air was thick with neglect and something else, something intangible. As she ventured further, she noticed old portraits lining the walls, their subjects' eyes seemingly following her. Desks were overturned, papers scattered, as if the occupants had left in haste. Then, she heard it, a soft whisper, almost melodic, echoing down the corridor. "Help me!" Heart pounding, Elena followed the voice to a classroom at the end of the hall. Inside, she found a diary, its leather cover worn with age. Flipping it open, she read the first entry. September 13th, 1923. "I fear I am being watched. Shadows move when no one is there, and the whispers. They call my name." The entries detailed the experiences of a student named Margaret, who believed she was being haunted by an unseen presence. The final entry sent chills down Elena's spine. October 31st, 1923. "I can no longer endure the torment. Tonight, I confront the darkness within these halls." Margaret was never seen again. Determined to uncover the truth, Elena delved into the school's archives. She discovered that Margaret had been a top student, known for her kindness and intellect. However, in the weeks leading up to her disappearance, she had become withdrawn and paranoid, speaking of shadows and whispers that no one else could perceive. Elena began experiencing similar phenomena. At night, she would wake to the feeling of being watched, her room colder than usual. Objects moved from their places, and the whispers grew more persistent. Seeking answers, she confided in Daniel. Together, they decided to spend a night in the East Wing, hoping to communicate with Margaret's spirit. Armed with candles and a Ouija board, Elena and Daniel sat in the center of the abandoned classroom where Elena had found the diary. The flame flickered as they joined hands, and Elena began the invocation. "Margaret, we seek your presence. We wish to help you find peace." The planchette moved slowly, spelling out, "Danger." A sudden gust extinguished the candles, plunging them into darkness. The whispers grew louder, transforming into anguished wails. Shadows coalesced, forming a dark figure at the edge of the room. "Leave now," it commanded. Terrified, Elena and Daniel fled, the entity's chilling presence pursuing them until they crossed the threshold of the East Wing. The next day, Elena confronted the headmistress, Ms. Hawthorne, about their experience. With a heavy sigh, Ms. Hawthorne revealed the truth. In 1923, a teacher named Mr. Grayson had become obsessed with dark rituals, believing he could harness otherworldly powers. Margaret discovered his intentions and tried to stop him. In a desperate act, Mr. Grayson sacrificed Margaret in a ritual, binding her spirit to the East Wing. The school covered up the incident, sealing off the wing and dismissing the staff involved. Determined to free Margaret, Elena and Daniel sought the help of a local historian versed in banishing rituals. They learned that by destroying the objects tied to the original ritual, they could sever the bond trapping Margaret's spirit. Under the cover of night, Elena and Daniel returned to the East Wing, armed with the necessary tools. They located the remnants of the ritual, a collection of arcane symbols etched into the floor and a blood-stained locket belonging to Margaret. As they began the cleansing ritual, the temperature plummeted. The dark figure of Mr. Grayson's spirit materialized, attempting to thwart their efforts. Shadows writhed, and the walls seemed to close in. Drawing strength from each other, they pressed on, chanting the incantations. The locket burned with an ethereal light before shattering, releasing a surge of energy that dispelled the darkness. A soft, warm glow enveloped the room, and for a brief moment, they saw Margaret's spirit, free and smiling, before she faded into the light. The oppressive atmosphere that had long plagued Blackwood Academy lifted. The East Wing was renovated and reopened, serving as a reminder of the school's tumultuous past and the bravery of those who sought to right its wrongs. Elena and Daniel's bond deepened, their shared experience a testament to the power of courage and friendship. The whispers ceased, but the story of Margaret's salvation became a legend. A true scary school story that would be passed down through generations, ensuring that the darkness would never be forgotten. While Blackwood Academy thrived, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that some shadows still lingered, watching, waiting. But she knew that as long as stories were told and memories preserved, the light would always prevail over the darkness. The air was thick with the smell of damp concrete and chalk dust as I stepped into Westbridge High School for the first time in years. It was supposed to be a quick visit, just a nostalgic detour on my way through town. The school had been abandoned since the late 90s, left to rot after a series of unexplained incidents drove the district to shut it down. Most people avoided the place, whispering about strange lights flickering in the windows or faint screams carried on the wind. I didn't believe the rumors back then. I was a skeptic, a senior who laughed off the ghost stories my classmates swore by. But standing in the empty parking lot now, staring at the cracked facade of the building, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. I pushed open the rusted front doors, the hinges groaning like a dying animal. The interior was a time capsule. Lockers still hung open, papers littered the floor, and faded posters clung to the walls, their edges curling like dead leaves. My footsteps echoed down the hallway, too loud in the stillness. I told myself I'd just take a quick look at my old homeroom, room 13, and leave. It was down the east corridor, past the science labs and the janitor's closet. But as I walked, the air grew colder, heavier, pressing against my chest like an invisible hand. Room 13 had always been a little off. Back in '95, kids said it was haunted by a student named Daniel Carver, who'd disappeared during a storm. The official story was that he'd run away, his parents were a mess, and he'd been caught sneaking vodka into class more than once. But the rumors were darker. Some said he'd been locked in the room overnight by a teacher who'd had enough of his antics. Others swore they'd seen his face in the window after hours, pale and pleading. I never saw anything myself, but I remembered how the room always felt wrong. Too quiet, too cold, even on the hottest days. The door to room 13 was still there, its paint peeling in long, jagged strips. The number 13 was barely legible, scratched into the wood as if someone had clawed it on with their nails. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the knob. A faint sound came from inside, a soft, rhythmic tapping, like fingers drumming on a desk. My rational mind screamed that it was just the wind or a loose pipe, but my gut told me to run. I didn't listen. I turned the knob and stepped inside. The room was exactly as I remembered it. Rows of desks, a chalkboard covered in faded scribbles, and a single flickering fluorescent light that buzzed like a trapped insect. But something was different. The desks weren't empty. On each one sat a small, crumpled piece of paper, folded into a tight square. I picked one up, my fingers trembling as I unfolded it. Scrawled in shaky handwriting were the words, "He's still here." My breath caught in my throat. I grabbed another note. "Don't look behind you." Another. "The walls are listening." The tapping grew louder, faster, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. I spun around, half expecting to see someone, or something, standing in the doorway, but it was empty, just the dark hallway stretching beyond. My heart hammered as I stuffed the notes into my pocket, determined to get out. That's when I noticed the chalkboard. The scribbles I'd seen earlier weren't random. They formed a sentence, written over and over in a frantic, looping scrawl. Daniel never left. The words seemed to pulse, growing darker as I stared, as if the chalk were bleeding into the board. A low creak broke the silence. One of the desks shifted, its metal legs scraping against the floor. Then another, and another. They moved slowly at first, inching toward me like animals stalking prey. I backed up, my shoulder brushing the wall. The plaster was cold and damp, but it wasn't just wet. It was sticky, like it was coated in something thick and warm. I yanked my hand away and saw red smeared across my fingers. Blood. It was seeping from the cracks in the wall, pooling on the floor in slow, deliberate streams. Panic clawed at my chest as I bolted for the door, but it slammed shut before I could reach it. The lock clicked, a sound so final it made my knees buckle. The tapping stopped, replaced by a voice, soft, raspy, and impossibly close. "You shouldn't have come back," it whispered, brushing against my ear like a breath. I turned, but there was nothing there. Just the desks, now arranged in a perfect circle around me, their surfaces slick with the same blood dripping from the walls. I pounded on the door, screaming for help, but my voice echoed back, distorted and mocking. The light flickered wildly, casting shadows that twisted into shapes. Hands reaching from the walls, faces pressing against the windows. And then I saw him, Daniel. He stood in the corner, his skin gray and mottled, his eyes black pits that swallowed the light. His mouth stretched into a grin, too wide, too wrong, revealing teeth sharpened to points. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stared as the room closed in around me. The floor tilted, and I stumbled, falling to my knees. The blood was everywhere now, rising like a tide, soaking my jeans. I clawed at the door, my nails splintering against the wood, but it wouldn't budge. Daniel's voice came again, louder this time, layered with a dozen others. Students, teachers, voices I recognized from years ago. "You left us," they hissed. "You forgot us." I hadn't forgotten. I just buried it. The fights, the bullying, the day Daniel had begged me to help him and I'd walked away, laughing with the others. The desks lurched forward, pinning me against the wall. The blood was up to my waist now, warm and pulsing like it had a heartbeat of its own. Daniel stepped closer, his grin splitting his face in two. "Stay with us," he said, his voice a chorus of screams. The light went out, plunging the room into darkness. I felt hands, cold, bony, countless, grabbing at my arms, my legs, my throat. They pulled me down into the blood, into the floor, into something deeper than I could comprehend. I don't know how long I was there. Minutes, hours, years. Time didn't exist in that void, just the endless weight of guilt and the suffocating press of those hands. When I woke up, I was outside, sprawled in the parking lot under a gray dawn sky. The school loomed behind me, silent and still, as if nothing had happened. My clothes were clean, my hands unmarked, but the notes were still in my pocket, crumpled and stained with blood that wasn't mine. I drove away, vowing never to return. But that night, in my motel room, I heard it again, the tapping. Soft at first, then louder, coming from the walls. I turned on the light and saw them. Tiny scratches forming words across the plaster. "You can't leave." I checked out at dawn, moved to another town, then another. It didn't matter. The tapping followed me. The words appeared everywhere, on mirrors, on ceilings, in the steam of my shower. "We're still here." Last week, I found an old yearbook in a thrift store, Westbridge High, class of '95. I flipped through it, my hands shaking, until I reached my class photo. There I was, smiling with the others. But in the background, in the window of room 13, was a face. Daniel's face. And next to him, another. And another. Faces of kids I'd known. Kids who'd vanished over the years, all staring out at me with those black, empty eyes. I burned the book, but it didn't help. Last night, the tapping stopped. Instead, I heard footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, coming up the stairs to my apartment. The door creaked open, and I saw them. Daniel and the others, their bodies twisted and broken, their mouths stretched into those impossible grins. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. I knew what they wanted. As I write this, the lights are flickering. The walls are bleeding again. And the desks. God help me, the desks from room 13 are here, arranged in a circle around my chair. I can feel their hands on me, pulling me back. I don't think I'll make it out this time. If you find this, don't go to Westbridge High. Don't look for room 13. And whatever you do, don't forget them. Because they won't forget you. It was a humid summer night when I first heard about the bell tower at St. Agnes Academy. My cousin, Mara, had been a teacher there until the school closed in 2003, and she swore the place was cursed. She'd called me out of the blue, her voice trembling over the phone, begging me to meet her at the old campus. "I need you to see it," she'd said. "I need someone else to know." I hadn't seen Mara in years, not since she'd started working at St. Agnes and drifted into a shell of herself. Pale, jumpy, always glancing over her shoulder. Against my better judgment, I agreed. The school sat on the edge of town, a squat brick building swallowed by overgrown ivy and shadowed by a crumbling bell tower that leaned slightly to the left, as if bowing under some unseen weight. The windows were boarded up, the parking lot cracked and sprouting weeds. Mara was waiting by the front gate, her flashlight beam jittering across the ground. She looked worse than I'd expected, her eyes sunken, her hands fidgeting with a set of keys she'd kept from her teaching days. "It's the bell," she whispered as we approached the entrance. It never stopped ringing. I laughed it off at first. The school had been abandoned for over 2 decades. There was no electricity, no one to pull the rope, but Mara's expression didn't crack. She unlocked the gate, and we slipped inside, the air growing thick with the scent of mold and something metallic I couldn't place. The hallway stretched out before us, dark and silent, littered with broken desks and faded flyers curling off the walls. Mara led me toward the stairwell at the far end, her flashlight cutting through the gloom. "They said it was a prank at first," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "The bell would ring at odd hours, 3 a.m., noon, random times. No one could explain it. The rope was tied down, the mechanism rusted shut, but it kept ringing. We climbed the stairs to the second floor, the wood creaking under our weight. Mara's story grew stranger. She said it started in '98, after a student named Clara Henshaw went missing. Clara had been quiet, a loner who spent hours sketching in the tower after school. One night, she didn't come home. The police found her backpack in the bell chamber, but no trace of her. After that, the ringing began, soft at first, then louder, more insistent. Teachers swore they heard a girl's voice in the sound, faint and pleading. The school board dismissed it as hysteria, but Mara said she'd heard it too. "It wasn't just a bell," she told me, her eyes darting to the shadows. "It was her." We reached the base of the tower, a narrow spiral staircase winding up into darkness. The air was colder here, heavy with a low hum that vibrated in my chest. I thought it was my imagination until Mara froze, her flashlight trembling. "Listen," she hissed, and there it was, a faint, metallic chime, echoing down the stairs. My stomach twisted. It wasn't loud, not yet, but it was unmistakable. A bell, ringing in a tower that hadn't been touched in years. I tried to rationalize it, wind, maybe, or a loose piece of metal clanging against the frame. But Mara was already climbing, her steps frantic, and I followed, the hum growing into a steady toll that rattled my teeth. The stairwell was claustrophobic, the walls slick with dampness, and every few steps, I caught a glimpse of something etched into the stone. Scratches, jagged and deep, forming words I couldn't read in the dim light. The higher we went, the colder it got, until my breath fogged in front of me. The bell chamber was small, barely 10 feet across, with a single window letting in slivers of moonlight. The bell hung in the center, rusted and motionless, its rope coiled on the floor like a dead snake. But the ringing was deafening now, a relentless clang that made my ears ache. Mara dropped her flashlight, the beam spinning wildly across the room, and that's when I saw it. The walls were covered in scratches, thousands of them, overlapping into a frantic tapestry of nonsense. No, not nonsense. Names. Clara's name, carved over and over, bleeding into the stone like ink. Mara grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. "She's here," she screamed over the noise. "She never left." The bell swung then. Not much, just a twitch, but enough to make my heart stop. There was no wind, no one touching it. The rope stayed still, but the bell moved, its clapper slamming against the sides with a force that shook the floor. I stumbled back, my foot catching on something soft. I looked down and saw Clara's backpack, or what was left of it. Rotted and stained, spilling pencils and crumpled sketches onto the floor. The sketches weren't normal. They showed the tower, the bell, and a figure. A girl with hollow eyes and a mouth stretched into a silent scream. In every drawing, she was reaching out, her hands clawing at the edges of the paper. I dropped them, my hands shaking, and that's when the ringing changed. It wasn't just sound anymore. It was a voice, high and keening, weaving through the tolls. "Help me," it said. "Help me, help me, help me." Mara was sobbing now, clawing at the walls as if she could dig her way out. The bell swung harder, faster, the air thickening with dust and the sharp tang of blood. I grabbed her, shouting that we had to leave, but she pulled away, her eyes wild. "You don't understand," she yelled. "I locked her in. I locked her in that night." My blood ran cold. She hadn't told me everything. Hadn't told me she'd been the last one with Clara, that she'd caught her sneaking into the tower and locked the door as a prank, thinking she'd let her out later. But she never did. The storm hit, the power went out, and Clara was gone. The bell stopped. The silence was worse, thick, suffocating, pressing against my skull. Then the floor cracked, a jagged line splitting the stone beneath us. Something was rising, black and oily, seeping up like tar, forming hands, arms, a face. Clara's face, twisted and wrong. Her eyes pits of shadow, her mouth gaping wider than any humans could. She didn't speak, but the air screamed for her, a wail that tore through me. Mara fell to her knees, begging forgiveness, but the thing didn't care. It wrapped around her, pulling her down into the crack, and I ran. I don't remember getting out, just the stairs, the cold, the sound of Mara's screams fading behind me. I collapsed in the parking lot, my lungs burning, and when I looked back, the tower was still, the bell silent. I told myself it was over. I was wrong. Days later, I found one of Clara's sketches in my jacket pocket. A drawing of me, standing in the tower, her hands around my throat. That night, the ringing started again, faint but growing, coming from my walls, my windows, my skull. I moved, changed cities, burned the sketch. It didn't matter. The bell followed me. Last night, I woke to find scratches on my ceiling. Clara's name, over and over, dripping red. And in the corner of my room, a shadow stood, small and still, watching me with hollow eyes.